The conditioned souls within the clutches of illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world, but they do not know the formula for peace, which is explained in this part of the Bhagavad Gita. The greatest peace formula is simply this: Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. In the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is described as Tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey, but actually they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is the master of material energy, and the conditioned souls are under the stringent rules of material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in the world either individually or collectively. This is the sense of Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna is a supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are his subordinates. One can attain perfect peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. The fifth chapter is a practical explanation of Krishna consciousness, generally known as Karma Yoga. The question of mental speculation as how Karma Yoga can give liberation is answered herewith. To work in Krishna consciousness is to work with the complete knowledge of the Lord as the predominator. Such work is not different from transcendental knowledge. Direct Krishna consciousness is Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. Krishna consciousness means to work in full knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme Absolute. And the perfection of this consciousness is full knowledge of Krishna or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A pure soul is the eternal servant of God as his fragmental part and parcel. He comes into contact with Maya, illusion, due to the desire to lord it over Maya. And that is the cause of his many sufferings. As long as he is in contact with matter, he has to execute work in terms of material necessities. Krishna consciousness, however, brings one into spiritual life even while one is within the jurisdiction of matter, for it is an arousing of spiritual existence by practice in the material world. The more one is advanced, the more he is free from the clutches of matter. The Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in an effort to control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And attaining Krishna consciousness by controlling the above-mentioned passions, one remains factually in the transcendental stage or Brahman Nirvana. The Eightfold Yoga mysticism is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose is served. There is gradual process of elevation in the practice of yama, niyama, asana, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, pranayama, and samadhi. But these only preface perfection by devotional service, which alone can award peace to the human being. It is the highest perfection of life. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Agnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Hare Krishna, can you all hear me?
Yes, bro.
Okay. So, continuing our discussion, Bhagavad Gita, Gita Live series. Today we are at the last verse of 5th chapter, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. So, this is another very important and significant verse, which is very important for us to understand, to actually attain something which we are all looking for. And Lord is instructing us as what we should do to find actual peace in life. So this verse says, Bhoktaram, beneficiary, Yagna Tapasam. Yagna refers to sacrifices, Tapasam of penances and austerities. So the word beneficiary is used especially when one is about to die and he writes a will. So the will, he writes the name of the beneficiary. So basically, who is going to get this property? Who is that is going to benefit from this act of whatever he has got? So that's how the word beneficiary is usually used in normal day terms. So here, it is referring that someone should be the beneficiary of all the sacrifices and tapasam. So Prabhupada is translating here tapasam as of penances and austerities. So who is that is supposed to benefit, who should be the beneficiary of all the sacrifices and penances is mentioned in this verse. And Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, and Sarvaloka, to all the planets and the demigods thereof. So Prabhupada is not only saying all the planets, Prabhupada is also including all the demigods and all the planets. Maheshwaram, the Supreme Lord. So just like we see, Prabhupada says back to Godhead. Prabhupada doesn't say back to God, because Prabhupada is saying that Godhead refers to the chief of all gods, Maheshwaram, the Supreme Lord, not just the Lord, but the Supreme Lord. Suhradam Sarva Bhutanam. The word Suhrad comes in different verses, and here it is being referred that the one who is the benefactor, the one who is Maheshwaram, the Supreme Lord, is also Suhradam Sarva Bhutanam. He is the most dear friend, the most benefactor of Sarva Bhutanam, of all the living entities. Jnatva Mam. So knowing this, knowing Mam, Krishna is referring to himself, me. So one who knows this, what does one should know? One should know that the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna is the enjoyer, is the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and all austerities and penances. He is the proprietor of all the planets and all the demigods. He is the Supreme Lord. And he's the real benefactor of all the living entities. So as soon as one comes to know this, one realizes this, immediately he achieves Richati Shantim. So as soon as one knows this, one can attain peace. So Prabhupada explains with an elaborate purport, and let's just read translation one more time. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities. So the sages, Prabhupada is using the word sages, and Prabhupada explains that the sages means those who have performed sacrifices or austerities to attain perfection. So not everyone can know that who is that Supreme Lord and what is the purpose of doing various activities. And here, therefore, Prabhupada is telling the sages, those who are seeking perfection, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. So everyone in the material world is afflicted with material miseries. As we know, the three kinds of miseries, Adhyatmik, Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik. Someone is troubled by one's own mind and body system. Someone is troubled because of other living entities with whom he is living. Or for no reason, someone is just coming and creating some trouble for another living entity. Or it could be the natural causes that is causing one to experience material miseries. So in one way or the other, everyone is undergoing some sort of pangs. And everyone is looking as how to get rid of this material miseries, the afflictions that are caused by this material miseries, how can one come out? And Srila Prabhupada is explaining in the purport what these words actually means, each line in more detail. So let us go one by one gradually. So the first point Prabhupada is bringing here is that there is a need for peace. There is no one who cannot say there is no need for peace. So especially in the Western world, especially in the Western world, there is a concept of peace comes when there is war. So for them, peace means when there's a world war, then when there's Vietnam War, they come with banners to say that we need peace. We don't want war. So that's the one kind of understanding about when they want peace and what the peace is. The other kind of peace that people try to understand is that United Nations, where there are delegates, there are politicians, before a war happens, or before there is some conflict that is happening, they want to create a system or some sort of mechanism by which they can find happiness and peace. So there is another class of people who are working to find peace. And Prabhupada says that in spite of having an organization like United Nations, people are failing to find peace. And why? Because Prabhupada says they're missing the root. They're not able to understand the root of the problem. And therefore, they're not able to apply the right solution, and therefore they're not able to find the real peace. So these are some people who talk about peace, but apart from them, we also see there is peace that each one of us looking in our own individual lives. So someone is having arguments with his family members, wife, husband, children, or someone else, or someone is having some kind of arguments or some distress in office, college, somewhere else where they're working. Or sometimes someone is distressed for no reason. One's own mind is so troubling. One's own emotions are so much troubling that the living entity is hoping, oh, where can I find peace? The other day I was talking to a student in Harvard, and she was mentioning, oh, all these days my mind, although I'm trying to control from not thinking few things, I cannot stop thinking. And therefore I'm struggling. And this chanting is helping me. So basically, in one way or the other, everyone is looking for some sort of peace in different degrees. So there is no denial that there is no one who is not looking for peace. So if you're all looking for peace, what is that is missing? So Prabhupada, in the very beginning of this purport, Prabhupada is explaining, this is a very beautiful sentence actually. The conditioned souls within the clutches of illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world. It's a very beautiful sentence actually, if we pay attention. So Prabhupada is mentioning who are looking for peace, not people who are just afflicted with war, not only people in United Nations, not only sometimes some people here and there when there is some issue in the home, in the family, or somewhere in the country that they're looking for peace. No. The Prabhupada is saying the conditioned souls within the clutches of illusory energy. So anyone who is under the clutches of Maya, under the clutches of illusory energy, that living entity who is conditioned in this material world is actually anxious for peace, is anxiously looking for peace. So anyone who is in this conditioned state, afflicted or bound by the material energy, cannot have peace. And because that is not the natural state of the living entity, that living entity is always looking and anxious for attaining peace. And Prabhupada also explains this point in Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll come to that later. But now the question comes that if we say, yes, if everyone is looking for peace, if that is the criteria, now we may go and ask people, are you peaceful? And usually we see people say, yes. And we might be confused sometimes. Oh, how are you saying peace? Then we may ask, how are you peaceful? What do you do? So someone may say, how do you achieve this? Then people say, I like to discuss issues when problem arises, and I solve the problem by discussion. Or someone may say, I solve the problem by surrendering to the enemy. No war, and therefore there is peace. Or someone may say, I find peace by sleeping or visiting some other new place away from my home, or go to some forest or some Haridwar, Rishikesh, and maybe I'll find peace. Or someone may say, spending time with my family gives me peace. So usually we see people give different answers. Oh, I work, and when I go to work, I find peace. So sometimes it may be difficult to understand, oh, is it really finding peace? And Prabhupada gives a wonderful answer to this point. Prabhupada brings in a term called standard of peace. Prabhupada brings this word in different places, and this is a very important point to understand. So Prabhupada says that it cannot be, so Prabhupada is mentioning this in a discussion with Shyamsundar Prabhu on the philosophy of William James. And Prabhupada says that there must be a standard of peace which is applicable to everyone. So someone was bringing a point that he was saying that I'm happy and peaceful when I drink. So Prabhupada says that cannot be the criteria of peace. There should be a criteria of peace which is equally applicable for all living entities. And if it's not the case, that is not the real standard of peace. So when we discuss these ideas of what is peace, what is happiness, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, they're establishing certain standards of what constitutes real peace and what is not real peace. And therefore, these standards of peace, because they are standard, they are applicable to everyone to understand what is that real understanding of peace and how it can be achieved by different classes of people. So moving further, so if this is what one is looking, if one is really looking for standard of peace, the real standard of peace, why is that people are not able to achieve this? What is that is missing? And Prabhupada reiterates this point in the Srimad Bhagavatam preface. Prabhupada says, although there is so much advancement in material civilization in terms of transportation, in terms of communication, in terms of people able to access so much information, so many things people have done over the past few centuries, but there is still something is missing because of which they are not able to find peace. And Prabhupada writes this, there is need of a clue as to how humanity can become one in peace, friendship, and prosperity with a common cause. Although there is so much advancement, there is no peace. One is having big degrees, but in the home, in one's own life, there is no peace. One is having so much money, but that is the real cause of anxiety and trouble. So if this is what is happening, people should inquire why, what is that is missing? How is this so fundamental thing that which we are all looking for is missing? And Prabhupada and Lord Krishna are giving answers as what is the solution for this which we are all looking. And one may question, is it really true that everyone is not peaceful in this world? Maybe there is someone who is peaceful in the world. And the very striking example Srila Prabhupada gives is that just like an aquatic animal, like fish, if it's out of water, can it be ever peaceful? Can it be ever satisfied? It can never be. Similarly, Prabhupada says, a human being, if he's put into water, he cannot live comfortably, he cannot be peaceful. And exactly like that, if the living entity, who is a spirit soul, who is meant to be in the spiritual world, full of eternity, bliss, and happiness, knowledge, if that living entity is in the material world, it's foreign to the living entity. It is not its natural state, it's not its natural environment, and therefore the living entity cannot be peaceful, just like the fish is not peaceful. But unfortunately, we do not recognize that. And when we do not recognize, we think, oh, this is the condition of the life. This is how the material world is, and that's how it's going on. There will be happiness and distress, and there will be sometimes peace and sometimes no peace. So that's the standard that I accept. But we need to recognize the real standard. And therefore, going through the scriptures help us to recognize the real standards. And they also provide solutions how to attain them, how to remove our miseries. And therefore, it is imperative for us to understand that everyone in the living and every living entity, as Prabhupada mentions, the conditioned souls in the material world who are bound by the material energy are all anxious to find peace. And therefore, we must recognize that everyone is looking for peace. And here is a formula that Lord is giving as how to attain that peace. And this is simple ingredients, 3 ingredients Lord is giving for us to know as why and how we can become free from the distress or lack of peace that we have in life. The first important point that the Lord is mentioning here is Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam. So Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam. So the sages knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities. So the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities. So usually people do some sort of sacrifice or the other. So someone takes one kind of austerity to make money. Someone takes another kind of austerity to get some fame, some education. So everyone is trying with a purpose, some sort of difficulty one is taking, because without difficulty, what can one achieve? As it is said, even in the case of lion, who is the king of jungle, the food does not just go into its mouth. It has to go and hunt the food. So similarly, every living entity has to work to even satisfy one's basic necessities. But what is one is trying to attain through this? What is the purpose? So there are different purposes that people ascribe as why they do yagna, tapasa, different kinds of austerities, penances. So to fulfill some political ambitions, one may be doing some fasting, or someone may be doing great austerities to attain some mystic power, or someone may be doing some sacrifices to get some wealth, some good education, some beautiful children, various kinds of things. So the all perfection that they're trying to seek from this different kinds of activities of yagna, tapa is to find some sort of material benefit. But that should not be the purpose of real yagna and tapasa. The real yagna that is being mentioned here is that one should know that the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities is to, the ultimate purpose is that Krishna is the ultimate purpose of all sacrifice and austerities. So Prabhupada beautifully explains that if one can understand that the only supreme enjoyer is Krishna, one will perform all kinds of sacrifices, penances, and austerities in order to attain Krishna's devotional service. So elsewhere in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Prabhupada is quoting this verse, Prabhupada mentions, if one can understand that the only supreme enjoyer is Krishna, if one can understand that the real enjoyer is Krishna, one will perform all kinds of sacrifices, penances, and austerities in order to attain Krishna's devotional service. So the different kinds of activities that we are all engaging in, if that purpose is not to attain devotional service. So as we see, dharmasya dharmasvanustisya pumsa vishvaksena kathasuyah notpadiyat yadi ratim shrama eva hi kevalam. So if our objective of working so hard to earn money, to do different kinds of activities, if they're not leading us to hear the glories of the Lord, if that is not helping us to become devotees, if that is not helping us to take to Krishna's devotional service, then notpadyat yadi ratim shrama eva hi kevalam. That labor is not of real gain. So here, Prabhupada also further explains elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 30 and verse 19. So these are the activities of the prachetas. So in this verse 19, Prabhupada is explaining about this verse again. And Prabhupada very beautifully explains the significance of this aspect of Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam. So Prabhupada says, generally a person living in a family becomes overly attached to fruitive activity. So fruitive activity means I am the enjoyer. And Prabhupada is saying generally a person in a family life becomes overly attached, not just attached, but overly attached. In other words, he tries to enjoy the results of his activities. So any activity one is doing, one is trying to see, am I getting satisfied? If not, is my family getting satisfied? Slightly extended version of that. So the whole goal of all activities is, how do I get satisfied? What is the benefit for me? And if not, what is the benefit for my society or my family? Maybe slightly higher would be society, but largely people are stuck in this two things of what is benefit for me and what is benefit for my small family. And then maybe slightly little extended family, but this is the core of all activities. If anything that is not favorable for that, one does not do that activity. So this is the usual conception that people carry. However, a devotee, however, knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. Neither I am the enjoyer, nor my family is my enjoyer, not my country is the real enjoyer, but Krishna is the real enjoyer. And now, why is this principle so important? Why is that one should recognize that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and neither me, my family, my society, my country, different classifications that we have are not the enjoyer? Because so Prabhupada quotes again this verse from Bhagavad Gita, Yagnarthat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tadardham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. One who tries to enjoy the fruit or the results of his activities becomes bound by the results. So one may think, oh, why should I offer the results to the Lord? Why he should be the ultimate purpose? I can have different purpose. But problem with that is that one becomes entangled more and more. The more one tries to control the material nature, the more one tries to go against the laws of the Lord, against the principles of religion, one is only complicating one's life further and further. As we were saying in the morning, the invisible waves. Similarly, there are so many invisible things for us which are not directly perceivable, but that requires jnana chakshusha. We need the knowledge, the vision of we need to see it through the lens of knowledge, through the eyes of knowledge. So, whereas one who offers the results or profits to the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not become entangled in the results. So this is very important. Now, generally, Prabhupada says that people try to take sannyasa so that they can become liberated from the results or action, the resultant reactions from the fruity work that they may obtain or they may get. But on the other hand, Prabhupada says that if one offers the results to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one remains in a liberated condition, even though one may not take the so-called sannyasa, in dress or in things. So, and Prabhupada also quotes two other verses to explain this further. So Prabhupada says, Iha yasya hare dasye karmana manasa gira niklashu api avasthasu jivan muktasa uchyate. So how can we engage? How can we serve the Lord? So through one's life, wealth, words, intelligence, and everything he possesses, if one engages them in the service of the Lord. So one's life, prana, artha, diya, and vacha. So if one is able to engage these abilities, these different things that we have got, which is all given to us by the Lord. And if we engage them, then we become liberated in any condition of life. Whether one is sannyas, whether one is grihastha, one is this, doesn't matter. But if one is following this principle of engaging everything in the service of the Lord, immediately he is liberated. And Prabhupada also says, devoid of Krishna consciousness, those who engage in material activities simply become more entangled in material bondage. They have to suffer and enjoy the actions and reactions of all activity. So people not knowing that everything belongs to Krishna, if one is engaging to enjoy those fruits, one is only causing the prolonging one's material existence and experiencing that suffering or the little gain that one is getting by doing different activities. So, which is an intelligent man sees that what is the use of a temporary gain and loss? Why not I make the permanent solution to all the miseries and attain the highest gain? And that is possible only when we employ all these faculties, all these life, wealth, words, and intelligence in the service of the Lord. Further, Prabhupada is saying that this Krishna consciousness movement is therefore the greatest boon to humanity because it keeps one always engaged in Krishna's service. So this is such a boon. This Krishna consciousness movement is such a boon because it is giving people an opportunity to do Krishna's service. Otherwise, where do we have an opportunity to make some donation? Where do we go and give some result to the Lord? Everywhere there is so much corruption. Everywhere there is irreligious principles, as we were saying, of different kinds in the morning. So where do we find a place where we can actually offer something that can be accepted by the Lord? We need a bona fide place, a bona fide organization, a bona fide system. And we are so fortunate to have Srila Prabhupada, a bona fide pure representative of the Lord, who can accept and offer to the Lord, and the Lord accepts because it is offered by his pure devotee. So therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement is such a boon, because otherwise, how do we engage in Krishna's service? How can we directly even know anything about Krishna or forget about service? So therefore, a total life in Krishna consciousness saves one from material contamination. So this is the way forward. So if we can engage a total life in Krishna consciousness, then there will be no material contamination. Further, Prabhupada quotes Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj and says, Krishna bhajane yaha haya anukula vishaya baliya tyage taha haya bhula. If one is so expert that he can engage everything or dowtail everything in the service of the Lord, to give up the material world would be a great blunder. One should learn how to dowtail everything in the service of the Lord, for everything is connected to Krishna. That is the real everything. And even that is being criticized here. Rather, it's being said here that if one is able to dowtail one's if one is able to dowtail one's abilities, one's everything in the service of the Lord, then it is not necessary that one has to artificially give up the material world, but it should be done in totality and under the direction of a pure devotee of the Lord. So further, Prabhupada quotes a couple of more verses, and in the end, Prabhupada also mentions that the activities, material activities for sense gratification and the material activities for the purpose of satisfying the Supreme Lord are not the same. I repeat, material activities for sense gratification and material activities for satisfying the Supreme Lord are not the same. Material activities for one's own gratification entangles one's, and whereas the so-called material activities which may appear that the devotees are doing, but when they are doing it for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, they are not binding, they're actually devotional service. So it is very important to recognize this. Am I doing this for the satisfaction of the Lord? Or if not, that becomes a material activity, and that can bind us. And therefore, Prabhupada also gives the example of one may get indigestion due to eating too many milk preparations, condensed milk, sweet rice, and so on. But even though there is indigestion or diarrhea, another milk preparation, yogurt mixed with black pepper and salt, will immediately cure these maladies. In other words, one milk preparation can cause indigestion and diarrhea, and another milk preparation can cure them. So one activity is material activity, which can cause a problem. On the other hand, if the same activity which is engaged in the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, then that can help one cure from the material contamination. And in this beautiful purport, Prabhupada also brings another point that if one is placed in material opulence due to the special mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he should not consider that opulence a cause for bondage. If by chance one receives some opulence, one should not artificially consider that opulence is a bondage. Rather, when a mature devotee is blessed with material opulence, He does not become affected adversely because he knows how to employ material opulence in the service of the Lord. So this is another great characteristics of advanced devotees. So when they are given by the mercy of the Lord some material opulence, they know how to engage that in the service of the Lord. So if by mercy of the Lord, if you receive something materially, rather than being averse, one should learn from under the direction of devotees as how to engage that completely in the service of the Lord. And Prabhupada gives the examples of Maharaj Prithu, Parikshit Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, Janaka Maharaj, Vaivasvata Manu, and there are different saintly kings who are all opulent, who are all rich, but they never engaged anything in their service. Rather, they always engaged everything that was there under their possession and their life, their words, everything in the service of the Lord. So the principle is stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead sometimes may take away the opulence. So, yasyaham anugranami harishye tad dhanam sanai. My first mercy shown to my devotees to take away all his material opulence. So when also Lord sometimes, when Lord sees that the material opulence is not good, is detrimental for the devotional service of the devotee, the Lord may also take away the opulences. And sometimes Lord may give, but in any case, the basic principle is that to engage everything in the service of the Lord. So this principle, knowing that bhoktaram yagnatapasam, that the ultimate purpose of doing all different activities is to please, satisfy the Lord, is to engage in devotional service. Otherwise, we are bound with material contamination. We are bound, entangled in this tabernacle of material world. So that is the first principle. And moving to the next one. So as we see, one may also question, but why should I only serve Krishna? Why should I only consider Krishna to be the supreme enjoyer? And it's being explained in the second line. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. So because he's the real proprietor, just like a person who's working in the bank, he cannot get the profit for himself. The owner, the proprietor is the one who is supposed to get. He's just acting on behalf of the employer, the proprietor. And therefore, similarly, the Supreme Lord is a proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. And how do we know this, that the Supreme Lord is a proprietor of all planets and the demigods? And as we see in different pastimes of the Lord, so this is also explained in the verse, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, the Supreme God of all planets and demigods. So as we see, Aham Sarvasya Prabho Matta Sarvam Pravartate, Janmadi Asya Yatha Anvayad Idaratascha Artheshu Abhignasvarat. So there are different verses from the Vedic literature which all mention about the supremacy of the Supreme Lord. And we also see Prabhupada quoting a verse in this purport, explaining how the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is actually the Supreme Lord. Tad tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. So amongst all of them, the Supreme Lord is actually the Lord Sri Krishna. And we also see this from different pastimes that we see in Krishna book, in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is mentioned as how the Lord Brahma, who thought that, who is this small boy? Why there are so many people who are with him? Why are they following him? Who is he? Now, eventually we can see what Lord Brahma did. He came and he offered his prayers, Lord Krishna explaining how he is the supreme cause of all causes, and beautiful prayers. So no one is greater than he. He's the greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. In the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is described as Tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. So all the demigods, even they worship the Supreme Lord. So sometimes people may misunderstand that maybe someone else I should offer my the results to, but no. Krishna is described in all the Vedic literatures as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And further, therefore, we should recognize the position of Lord Krishna and Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam, and therefore we must know that he is the actual proprietor and actual owner and enjoyer of everything. So Prabhupada is also giving, in the purport, Prabhupada is explaining the condition of the living entities. While the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of everything, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, what do the living entities think of themselves? So Prabhupada says, under the spell of illusion, the living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey, but actually they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. So everyone is trying to lord over all they survey. So someone is trying to find how I can control more and more people. If it's working, how can I have more people? Someone is trying to see how I can control government. Someone is trying to see how I can control some, my family members. So everyone is trying to control others. This tendency. So there's two basic tendencies: to enjoy for oneself and to control. These are the two impurities of material consciousness. And both of them are being explained in this verse. So to recognize that I'm not the proprietor and neither I'm the enjoyer is elevation to spiritual consciousness. And in the illusion, one is thinking, no, I am the controller. Everyone should follow me. How can you not follow me? And someone may think, not only that I'll control other people, I'll control the laws of material nature. I'll make some big, big instruments. I'll make something else. We'll all go to Mars and live happily. If Earth goes away, I will live in Mars. Or maybe I'll live in some other planet. I'll make some other kind of arrangements. And one is thinking that, I can dominate this material laws, the material energy of the Lord. But it is said the Lord is the master of material nature, and the conditioned souls are under the stringent rules of material nature. So Prabhupada is not only saying that Lord is the master of the living entities, the conditioned souls, but here Prabhupada is saying Lord is the master of material nature and the living entities are under the laws of material nature. So how much we are illusion to assume that we are the proprietors, we are the masters. So we are all bound tightly by this laws of material nature, birth, death, old age, and disease, which are inflicting and afflicting every living entity. But because of illusion, we do not recognize that these are the problems, and these are all because of this forgetfulness, one is afflicted with various misconceptions that we are the masters. And as one tries to engage in different activities, considering oneself in to be a master, one is only being implicated more and more, and there is no question of peace. One of the reasons why people fight is because one is trying to become master or another. So this is another delusion that the living entities in the material world live with. The third instruction, or the third important point that is required for the peace formula Lord mentions here is Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. So Suhridam, the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. So it is very important to also note that anyone knows what Srila Prabhupada signs. When he signs, what does he write on top of that? Yes. So this is also the quality of a pure devotee of the Lord. Your eternal well-wisher. It's so difficult to be a well-wisher. And to be an eternal well-wisher, how difficult it is. Only a pure devotee of the Lord and the Supreme Lord can be. Because the living entities are so envious of each other. They're trying to maximize one's own profits over another's losses. So there is no well-wishing. The well-wishing is as long as there is some mutual benefit. As long as there is no mutual benefit, no one is no one's. There is this fight. So here it is being said that Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, of all living entities, not just one or the other person. I'm well-wisher of my family members. I'm well-wisher of my community members. No. The Supreme Lord is well-wisher of all living entities. And what does benefactor mean? So as we see this verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, which says, Suhridam, which says about hearing one point. Srinvatam Swakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Hridyantasto hi abhadrani, Suhrut Sat Vidunoti Sruhat Satam. So, why the Lord is the most well-wisher, the benefactor and the well-wisher? He sitting in the heart is removing all this vidunoti, the material contamination within our heart. Life after life, the Lord is present as Paramatma in the living entities. Although living entities do not want to serve the Lord, although the living entities are averse of the Lord still resides in the heart, guiding the living entity. As we see in the Upanishad, it's mentioned like two birds living in the same tree. So the Lord, the individual bird, is trying to enjoy and suffer its own fruits. But the Lord is waiting, when will this living entity turn his face towards me? And by which all the problems can be solved. So this aversion, although we are averse to the Supreme Lord, the Lord is so merciful, is ever well-wisher, and is helping us to guide us to that eternal, real, peaceful position. And therefore, we must recognize that the Lord is very, very merciful. I'll quickly go through one example here, which is talking about Jadabharta. And we know sometimes that we all try to become well-wishers of others, the real benefactors. But in this case of Jadabharta, when he saw that a deer, mother deer which was pregnant, and when it heard the roar of a lion, it immediately jumped to the other side of the river in fear, and it gave birth to a child and it died. So seeing this, Maharaj Bharta, who renounced everything and was trying to practice various austerities and make progress in devotional life, when he saw this, he wanted to help and become the benefactor of the baby deer. And in this, we can see that even when he was doing yajna, he is thinking of the deer. And when he was not able to see the deer for sometimes, he would think different aspects of where it is, what happened to it, did you see, oh moon, and things like that he would talk. And finally, you can see at the time of death, he was remembering about deer. And so similarly, Prabhupada mentions that if people are trying to be philanthropic, altruistic, and trying to become friend of my countrymen, my society, my family, but that is a wrong conception. Real friend is Krishna. I can work on his behalf. So this wrong conception that I can be the real benefactor, the complete well-wisher of other person in totality, because he is my countryman, my family member, is not true. We are not actually the true benefactors. When we can connect them to pure devotee of the Lord, to Lord Krishna, and when we act on behalf of them, then we can do some well-being to the others. So this is another important aspect note. And so in short, Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam. So if one understands these three principles of life, that everything, the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and yagnas, all austerities is to know Krishna, is for Krishna, and he is the proprietor of all the planets and the demigods. He is the supreme Lord. He is the well-wisher and benefactor. When one understands these principles, then one can attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. I'll quickly just go through a few slides that we have. So elsewhere in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is also mentioned, Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Atheva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashanta. So one who is not a devotee cannot be peaceful. Not just a materialist, even an impersonalist, because he's trying to become one with the Supreme, which is not possible. Because he's trying to achieve, he's trying to desire something which is not achievable, he becomes unhappy and therefore not peaceful. Similarly, yogis who may have different kinds of mystic powers, even they cannot actually find true happiness and peace, because this is an impediment. without devotional service, just having mystic powers is an impediment in one to become peaceful. But whereas only the devotees, because they do not have any other aspiration except to remain in their constitutional position to serve the Supreme Lord, they can remain peaceful because they don't have any interest, selfish interest. Their interest is only the interest of the Lord, and therefore they can attain peace. And Prabhupada in the purport writes, one can attain perfect peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. It's another beautiful word. Prabhupada is using perfect peace, standard of peace, real peace. So Prabhupada doesn't just use the word peace. Prabhupada uses different words in different contexts to explain the further meaning of what the real peace that one can attain. So I'll just go through the remaining few sections of purport just to highlight a few points. So Prabhupada is explaining in this the second half of the purport that direct Krishna consciousness is Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. So when one is taking to this process of Krishna consciousness, the aspect of Jnana or knowledge that one can acquire by this process of Jnana is already embedded into it. So there is no need for one to do anything else extra in order to attain some knowledge. No, when one is in a real understanding of who the Supreme Lord is, what is one's position, and how to act, then he is in knowledge of all that one can obtain by Jnana Yoga, and in fact, even more. Further, it is also said, a pure soul is a servant of God as his fragmental part and parcel. He comes into contact with Maya due to desire to lord it over Maya, and that is the cause of his many sufferings. As long as he is in contact with matter, he has to execute work in terms of material necessities. Krishna consciousness, however, brings one into spiritual life even while one is within the jurisdiction of matter, for it is an arousing of spiritual existence by practice in the material world. So now Prabhupada is explaining how does one become, when a living entity whose spirit soul, he is having this tendency to lord over matter, and who is trying to struggle in this executing various things. Now, how can that living entity who is suffering, who is in this unnatural state, how can he attain peace? And Prabhupada is giving here that this process of Krishna consciousness brings one into spiritual life even while one is within the jurisdiction of matter. For it is an arousing of spiritual existence by practice in the material world. So it is not an artificial sentiment. Prabhupada is mentioning by practice in the material world. So one has to practice this process of Krishna consciousness. Then the real spiritual life, the real spiritual consciousness that one is carrying, one is supposed to carry, awakens. The more one is advanced, the more he is freed from the clutches of matter. So unless one is not advanced in spiritual consciousness, one is tightly bound by the laws of material nature. The clutches of matter entangles the living entity more and more one advances, the more and more one is freed from the clutches of matter. And Prabhupada also mentions the Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in an effort to control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger. So Prabhupada is saying, it is not that someone is taking to Bhakti Yoga and someone is not taking because the Lord is partial. No, it depends on one's practical performance of duties to control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger, as we saw, kama, krodha, udvegam. So who is able to shaknoti iheva shodum? So who is able to tolerate or control these desires or conquer over this desire and anger and the senses? So if one does not put effort, does not practice this, then there is no question of one being freed from this influence of matter, the laws of material nature. But when one makes an effort, then as God helps them who help themselves. So we should practice, we should put an effort. And attaining Krishna consciousness by controlling the above mentioned passions, one remains factually in the transcendental stage or Brahman Nirvana. So as soon as one recognizes I'm not this body, I'm spirit, soul, and therefore there is no more hankering and lamentation of this material world. Otherwise, we are driven by so many hankerings and lamentations of this is happening, that is happening, so many things in the material world. We are all so much troubled. But as soon as we come to our real position by controlling these passions, unwanted desires, unwanted anger, and irregulated sense, like no control over senses. So if we do not do all these things, then we cannot be situated in a state where we are actually peaceful, where we are free from lamentation and hankering. Otherwise, everyone is burning in their heart with so many hankerings, so many material ambitions and goals, and not satisfied in spite of trying to achieve so many of them. Finally, Prabhupada says that the Eightfold Yoga mysticism is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose is served. So again, Prabhupada is also bringing in, just like Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Krishna consciousness, and if one is in Krishna consciousness, he already has everything in Jnana Yoga. And similarly, one who is in Krishna consciousness is also, the goal that one can attain by practicing Eightfold Yoga system is also attained by that person who's already in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada finally says that these 8 processes or Eightfold Yoga mysticism only preface perfection by devotional, but these only preface perfection by devotional service, which alone can award peace to the human being. So devotional service, simply by practicing Krishna consciousness, the Navavida Bhakti, by performing this process of Krishna consciousness, it can award peace, and one does not need to practice anything else beyond this. It is the highest perfection of life. So those are some of the points from today's verse. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. So if you get time, I would just recommend all of you to look at this verse, the chapter 4, Canto 4, chapter 30 and text 19. It's a beautiful verse. And also this verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, verse chapter 19 and verse 149. These are very beautiful verses where Prabhupada is further quoting this verse of Bhuktaram Yagna Tapasam and giving further explanation, which is very nice.